Yeah. So I'm Chris Wade. I'm a speech and language therapist, and today I'm going to run a it's going to be a slightly interactive kind of webinar on setting up your independent practice. I've already had a girl that I used to employ contact me saying you spelt practice wrong. So on all the social media put out about it in the last couple of days, I'd spelt practice with an S. I genuinely didn't have a clue what she was saying when she's like, no, I'm like, no, practice is spelt with an S, but apparently when it's in this context, it's spelt with a C. So I'm hoping this is the right spelling. This webinar is, it's not going to run as smoothly as you'd expect a webinar to run. I do go back and forth. I might fly off on a tangent. And that's kind of how my brain tends to work. And what I do promise is that you'll leave the webinar with quite a few kind of strong pointers that you can kind of take ahead in terms of developing your own practice. But it will be, you might have, obviously the recording will be sent out. I can send a copy of the presentation slides as well, and it's separate to the recording, but it will be kind of jumping back and forth, but that's kind of how I've seen things as I've kind of developed my practice. I've started every webinar with the same question. And it's a question my wife asked me at the beginning of the first one. And so essentially, like I said, start every webinar with the same question. It's what makes me qualified to talk about this? And my wife asked me this question when I were looking at a report writing webinar, and it made me think, made me really reflect, right, what does make me qualified to talk about this topic? And if I think about this topic, if I look at my background, so if we look at my background, so I qualified in 2007. I did a degree before I did speech therapy. Did the BSc in speech therapy, qualified in Leeds 2007. And then I took on various different NHS roles over a kind of an 8-year period. So I worked across kind of 5 different teams in London, 2 different teams in Wales. And then during this time, so pretty much 2 years after qualifying, I set up independently. And I set up a company. I don't want to mention the company name because it's a company that I sold, but I set up a company that ended up growing quite big. And when I set the company up, I called it the Location Speech Therapy rather than under my own name. And within a year, and we're going to talk through the journey, within a year, I started to kind of bring in associates and employing people. And then in 2017, so late 2017, I sold that company on to a kind of very large kind of healthcare company or kind of healthcare consortium in the UAE. And then I set up again pretty soon afterwards. Once you're a speech therapist, if you absolutely love your job, then you create something in terms of the brand, but then you're able to, in a sense, sell the brand on and then just kind of carry on working as an independent speech therapist. So I set up again in 2017. So I resigned from the previous company in the March 2017. I'd set up again by the April, and then I started to kind of build the caseload up again. And what I'm kind of talking about today is the lessons that I learned from the previous company, and the types of things that I'm doing now, which are based on what I've learned. So I've gone through kind of the ups and downs of running a kind of a large independent practice. And today's more all about kind of the ups and downs of how I've done that. What we're going to cover today is we're going to cover kind of the actual physical side of setting up an independent practice, how to market yourself, the difference between personal and kind of commercial branding, the idea of how to set pricing, which is always a very tricky kind of area to look at, whether it's a good decision to employ or not to employ, depending on where you are in your journey. Business mentoring, and then also kind of we'll be dipping back and forth, like I said, kind of go off on a tangent back and forth on what lessons I've learned based on what I've done so far. Again, this is the question I ask myself a lot when working independently, and it is it worth it? I've applied for NHS jobs. I've applied for kind of big healthcare jobs, so direct positions in lots of different kind of trusts and private healthcare, etc. And every so often I kind of look at what I'm doing and I think, right, is it worth it? Do I want to continue being completely independent, or do I want the stability and all the pros that come with employment And every time I kind of apply for a job, I get offered an interview and then I decline the interview. And part of me just thinks, right, no, it is worth it. So these are the negatives. There's a long list of negatives, but it's still worth it. And it's worth every second of it. So again, obviously there's no fixed income. There's no guarantee that the family or the client that you saw on the Monday for an assessment will want to continue with therapy if they need therapy. There's no guarantee that if you set up an assessment and book the appointment, that the assessment will actually go ahead. There's no fixed hours. I